Okay, hold on. Let's see. That's off, that's off, that's off. That's on. That's on. Okay, we're good to go. Hello! Shadowcat back with more Pokemon. And we're picking up in the thick of it today. So we're still working on conditions. We still got a lot to do. Several of these we've already discussed are pretty much just, we can ignore them because there's a lot of things that came up with Pokemon Arceus that are really specific to just Pokemon Arceus. A lot of it's even kind of duplicate stuff that we already had, and they had to change the name for whatever reason it happened to be. They just decided they had to change it. So we're discovering there's a lot of things that we can just skip over. Some of this stuff, though, is tough. I mean, some of it's really tough because, like, today, we got a real barn burner on our hands. I'm going to pull everything up because we'll go over what we did last time, and then we'll get into what we're doing today. It shouldn't exactly be a long recap. Of course, I say that, and the last time we were here, we spent like an hour on the recap, so we're definitely not doing that again. But alright, I'll bring everything else in here. As I'm doing that, I do have people in the chat this morning. Blizzstar is in the chat. Hello, Blizz. Good to see you here. Go ahead and grab my browser. I see that Alden's in the chat. Hello, Alden. Good to have you here, too. I'll grab this. Alright. So, when we were here last time, we started going through all of these. We did, well, actually, before we even got done, or before we did last week, we had everything burned through badly poisoned done, and those look good. Sleep is just that, it's a sleep. Ability change is per the rules. We don't need to do anything for that one. Ability suppression, you're just turning their stuff off. That's simple. Type change is per the rules because it's really just changing your type. There's nothing else has to be done. Mimic is just stealing their moves, so per the moves. Substitute. I really like Substitute. This one's really fun just because this is the kind of thing that I would do like all the time if I could. You get to basically remove your Pokemon from the world, and what you leave behind looks exactly like them. It's just a substitute with 1/4 of its max HP, and when it gets knocked out, your actual Pokemon comes back into place. So it's cool. It doesn't really give you more hit points or anything like that, but what it does is it saves you from any one-hit KOs. It essentially lets you get KO'd 4 times. Alright, transforming lets you copy everything, pretty much their entire sheet except for their HP, which is cool. Illusion, also per the rules. Bound, they cannot switch out or flee. And it also does, damage to them every turn. Not much damage, but it does some damage. Sky is in the chat. Hello, Sky. Good to see you. Curse and Nightmare, both basically the same thing. We're just going to follow the rules, and that leaves us on Perish Song. So, this is where we were last time, and we had to make a decision on this one. I haven't made a decision on it yet, which is why we're going to discuss it a little bit before we get going, because the question is, like, what exactly are Pokemon going to do? And this is the real question that we have to start with. Because in Pokemon, we have 2 conflicting settings. See, there is Pokemon the manga, and then there is Pokemon the everything else. Now, Pokemon the everything else is designed for children. And as it's designed for children, there are some lines that you simply do not cross. You don't show blood, you don't show boobs, and you don't kill things. Which is why every single time a Pokemon goes down, it faints. And for some reason, brain damage doesn't exist in Pokemon. So, I don't know what we're doing here. Why are we even counting this? Trust me, if you get knocked unconscious, you need to go see a doctor. Because there is no such thing as getting knocked out without brain damage. Getting knocked out is the brain damage. So every single time a Pokemon goes down, it faints, which is to say that it's been KO'd. And that's fine, except that the game that we're playing involves a lot more permanence. Every single thing that we do is going to affect the world in some way. Now, sometimes those are little things, and sometimes those are big things. Obviously, if you have a trail of, high-level adventurers coming through town, and they're chasing some kind of Arc-Lich who is seeking to rule over an entire region of the world by constructing an entire tower made of bones and using that as a ritual array to spread their necromantic spells over the entire area, that is something that is going to affect the entire world. Which is why, you're playing the heroes. You, as one of those heroes, get to affect the world on a grand scale, and it's a power fantasy that lots of people want to engage in. But there are so many other things that happen in that world that are just small potatoes. I mean, you're traveling down the road and you get ambushed by a group of bandits. Well, I mean, every single one of those bandits also has a story. It's not a very big story, and let's face it, by the time they meet you, it's also not going to be a very long story either. But the fact is that they have their own story. They technically leave their mark on the world. It's just a very, very small mark. But that mark still remains. Technically speaking, we can follow the story of every single one of those bandits and say, this is when they were born, these were their parents, these were the people that they knew, this was the village they grew up in. They are a part of something much bigger. This is the one thing that really sets tabletop gaming apart from everything else. It's the permanence. I mean, if you wanted to just play a tabletop game of Dungeons & Dragons like a game of Monopoly, you can do that. They're called modules. Okay, what I'm technically doing is a module, but what I mean is a module is usually a self-contained story. It comes with a pre-written story, pre-made characters, pre-made maps, everything else. What's it called? Now I can't remember it. I just totally mind blanked this one. The most famous dungeon of all. And I've lost it. I can't remember. Anyway, you can get a boxed module, and you can sit down with your friends and say, we're going to play Dungeons & Dragons. And you open up the box, you pull everything out, and you say, okay, who's going to be the DM? You pick one person to be the DM. They get to sit behind the screen. You pass out the characters to everybody else. Everyone picks their own character, and you can sit down and play it. Those are meant to be played in like one sitting. Maybe two if you're exceptionally slow. But it's like one night, you get all the friends together, you've got some drinks, you got some snacks, you're going to roll some dice and play Dungeons & Dragons. That is one way to do it. Most people, though, want to play a longer-term story with permanence, where everything that you do matters. And it matters because if you have a good DM who actually does things like keeps notes, all of those things can be referenced back to. Now, why does this matter for what we're talking about? This matters because if we're going down the road, you get or you have these bandits that jump out from the trees and the bushes and they decide they're going to ambush you. This can go one of two ways. Number one, we're going to go with just the average typical Dungeons & Dragons experience. The bandits jump out and they ambush your party. Your party immediately draws their weapons and you fight. And after a mighty struggle against the bandits, you leave them all slain in the road, and then of course you pick over their corpses, you empty their pockets, you loot the bodies, and you move on. Okay, that's fine. But those bandits are still dead. Okay? They're dead. They will never threaten anybody again. They will also not go home to whatever families they had. Their relations are never going to see them again. Whatever it is. On the flip side, though, what if we removed death? Okay, what if we removed death? So now we're going to fight them all the way to the point where they fall unconscious, but they never actually die. All right, that's fine. That means that after you move on, you can move on with the good feeling that you haven't actually hurt anyone today. You can still loot the bodies. You can steal everything that they had. But, of course, they can just rearm and they'll threaten other people, and nothing in the world has actually changed. Or if it has changed in such a smaller level. I suppose if you looted them, now they have to rearm, they have to go back and get axes and bows and all that kind of stuff. So you've caused them some monetary damage. Okay. What about your own characters? See, in Dungeons & Dragons, at least in previous editions of Dungeons & Dragons, what happened was, if you hit -1 hit points, you were now officially dying. And so every turn, you would have to make a heal check to stabilize. Or was it a constitution check? I don't remember. There was a constitution check, actually. You would make a constitution check to stabilize, or you would lose 1 hit point per turn. And if you got down to a -10 hit points, your character was dead. Pathfinder was a little bit better, because Pathfinder, it had to be a negative hit point equal to your constitution. So characters with higher constitutions could bleed out longer. Characters with weaker constitutions would die faster. And then in 5th edition, they introduced a new death mechanic where you have to get like 3 saves or 3 losses, and then your character dies, and I hate it. I really do. I think it's dumb. Point being is that eventually, one way or another, no matter what system it is, your character can die. So can their characters. Everybody can die, and that affects the world. And here's where we have a major incongruity between normal tabletop games and Pokemon. One of them has permanence and the other one doesn't. Now, we have to square this peg because this is going to determine exactly what Pokemon can do. The thing about Perish Song is that Perish Song is going to faint. I'm doing air quotes, but I mean, you can't see the air quotes. It's going to faint all of the targets in the field. And when we're talking about all the targets in the field, it can be a very, very large field. This was just a random one that we rolled up, and it's the entire field. Perish Song needs to do one of 2 things. It's either going to sleep everybody, or it's going to kill everybody. Now, I can make this work either way. Okay? I can make this work either way. If we're going to make it absolutely lethal, we can counteract that with a very low chance to actually kill everybody. Because that's how we do this. If we're going to increase the lethality of it, we can decrease the effectiveness of it. And that's fine. That's an easy way to balance that. If it just sleeps everybody, we can make it very effective, but then what about the rest of their moves? Because every single move causes a Pokemon to faint. Flamethrower does damage, yes, but what does it ultimately do after it's done its damage? It causes the other Pokemon to faint. If both Perish Song and Flamethrower cause the same effect, then both of them have to operate in the same way. I have a couple of solutions, though. I have a couple ideas. The one that I think is the most likely to work is the idea that Pokemon are going to pull their punches, which is... It's not an idea that I'm terribly fond of. So the idea is this. A Pokemon is going to treat every single attack differently, depending on whether it's throwing it at a person, at a Pokemon, or at a palisade. So here's what I mean by that. Let's say that they're using Hydro Pump. Now, Hydro Pump, the pressure in Hydro Pump is so high that it can supposedly just destroy whatever's in front of it. In fact, I wonder if it'll even say in here. I'm going to want water type moves. Probably gonna be down at the end. Yep, here we go. Hydro Stream? Actually, what am I doing? I'm not going to sort it by type. Sort by power. It's one of the most powerful moves in the game. Oceanic Operetta? Never heard of that one. Dragon, water, Hydro Cannon. Here we go. So, somewhere in here, it's going to have descriptions. Oh, I guess that was it. Actually, this might not be it, because Hydro Pump did not leave you vulnerable the next turn. So, Hydro Pump must be a lesser version of that. We'll keep scrolling down a little bit. Wave Crash. Oh, there's Hydro Pump. Okay, I was right. It was a lesser version. So this is an old move, so it should have a decent description in here. The strongest water-type attack move, while powerful it may miss. Okay, it doesn't have a very broad description. Point is, though, that I've seen, Death Battle. Death Battle went over Hydro Pump, and when they did, I think they calculated that it can dissolve granite. Technically speaking, if you can dissolve granite with water, I mean, that's basically like a water cutter. And if you've never seen a water jet cutter, they cut steel with it. If you can cut steel, it's going through everything else. So we could make it so that they're pulling their punches when they attack anybody else. That's a weird inconsistency, though. Because if we go that route, it means that if you come across a wild Pokemon, the wild Pokemon is going to pull its punches too? See, that doesn't make any sense. It's a logical inconsistency. And yes, while I do agree that we are playing in a fantasy world, we do still try to work out as many of those logical inconsistencies as well. I mean, yes, do we agree that we have magic and we can throw fireballs and summon lightning bolts? Sure, we do make some exceptions for logic. But at the same time, we don't suddenly say that, yeah, I'm going to take my sword and I'm going to throw it like a boomerang because why can't I? Where in the rules does it say that I can't throw my sword like a boomerang? Well, there is nothing in the rules that says you can't do that. It's just dumb. So, there is a large part of Dungeons & Dragons that runs entirely on just common sense. Alden says, I think they were doing Blastoise as Pokedex states that it can cut steel with its water cannons. That might have been it. I do recall that they said that the water cannons and Hydro Pump are just obscenely strong. However, if Blastoise can cut Steel with its water cannons, and Blastoise is using Hydro Pump to do that because that's where the Hydro Pump comes out of. I'm just going to go ahead and assume that every Pokemon that can do Water Pump is doing the same thing. Again, logical consistency. The alternatives, because like I said, that was my best solution, even if it's not a good solution. My other solutions were this. Number 2 solution. Pokemon moves are non-lethal, okay? That's fine, and from a combat standpoint, that fixes all of my problems. The downside is that, technically speaking, when it comes to damaging objects, you cannot damage an object with a non-lethal attack. Period. End of story. You can't do it. And if you need more explanation than that one, think of it like trying to tase a door. Okay? Tasers are non-lethal. Tasers will shut down pretty much anybody that you hit with them except for Florida Man. At the same time, if you try to tase the door is not going to care. And it doesn't even have to be a taser. Other less lethal options, let's say a shotgun with beanbag rounds. Now, anybody who's either been hit by a beanbag round or has seen the fallout from being hit by a beanbag round will know that they will bruise the shit out of you. Beanbags are not fun. They are meant to stop you from doing whatever it is you're doing, and they do a really good job of it. But again, that's people. If you shoot a beanbag round at a door, it'll break a window, I guess. But then again, you can punch a window and break a window, so we're not exactly giving that one a high bar. So that's not exactly a great option either. So then what else can we do? Well, the original thought was that we make everything lethal damage, which makes sense. This means that if Charizard uses a flamethrower against another Pokemon or against you, it's going to hurt. It also means that if Charizard uses flamethrower against a door, it's going to destroy the door, and I really, really like that. Okay? I think that's great. Because I can just imagine you go up to a door and it's like, the door is locked. Alright, I knock on the door. Nobody answers. Well, we really need to get in there. So you toss your Pokeball, out comes Charizard, and you say, Charizard, use flamethrower. And so Charizard, depending on what the door is made out of, either incinerates or melts the door. And that's what I really want. Is because I can build a battle simulator for Pokemon all the time. But what I really want to simulate here is what can you do with your Pokemon? And I don't just mean battle. Obviously, there are going to be Pokemon that are mounts. I mean, if you have a Ponyta or a Rapidash, I want you to be able to ride your Ponyta or Rapidash. I don't know. In fact, I'm almost certain that in the games there's nothing you can do with a Rapidash because the only travel Pokemon that you get are Pokemon that swim or fly. Just because in the game, the only things that you would need them for is to transit over water or to transit over air. There's no point in having a land transit Pokemon because you can walk at whatever speed you need to be walking. That and they give you a bicycle. That's usually useless. Seriously, does anybody actually use the bicycle? The only time I ever used the bicycle was when I needed to, because there was a ramp. Is there like any other reason to use the bicycle otherwise? Didn't think so. Although I will give it to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, because with a big open map, you kind of needed it there. Anyway, so I want you to be able to like ride on your Pokemon. At the same time, you have a Pokemon like Rapidash or wow, my brain's just not working this morning. Anyway, Rapidash is all flames. So it's a horse. Or is it a unicorn? Is it a unicorn? Actually, I think it has a horn. Hold on. Not gonna look it up. Rapidash. No, it's got a horn. So it's a unicorn. So anyway, you got a Rapidash. You stop moving for the day, you break to make camp. Alright, so what do? Normally, part of making camp is you would make a campfire. Why? Well, number one, you're going to want light. Number two, you're going to want heat. Number three, you're going to want to cook things. And quite frankly, who says you can't roast marshmallows over a Rapidash mane? Alright, who says you can't? Then again, if we're going to do that, technically speaking, I guess you can't ride on a Rapidash because it's on fire, but we'll do something. Maybe it can alter its flames to make them non-lethal. I don't know. Let's see. Blizzard says in Ruby and Sapphire there were places that can only be reached or can't be reached other than by bike. Well, that's what I was saying in Pearl and Diamond. There were ramps that you had to get going fast on a bike to jump over, and that was literally the only times I ever touched a bike, because, again, why else would you? Alden says, Sun and Moon did toy with the idea of ride Pokemon. They were trying to phase out of HMs. Alright, that's fair. I know that they phased those out in Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl. Which is why I don't count Brilliant Diamond or Shining Pearl as my first Pokemon, because I didn't play the right version. I played the better version, but it's not the right version. Alright, so anyway, point being, I want you to be able to do things with your other Pokemon. And that might be, everything from having a ride Pokemon to be able to use your Pokemon in weird ways. I mean, I can't think of every single weird way to use your Pokemon off the top of my head, because that's part of the fun. Part of the fun is the fact that you're going to have 6 Pokemon. Okay, you're going to have 6 Pokemon. And with those 6 Pokemon, you are going to want to try to make the most use out of them you can. I mean, you're probably going to have a grass type, a fire type, a water type, and let's say a fighting type, and a bug type, and a dark type. Alright? So you got all those different types. And that's going to be a matter of how do you use them. I mean, technically speaking, I said that you would, you'd want to get like a fire Pokemon to have them flamethrower a door. But let's not forget that our fire types are going to be able to do fire damage with their own hands, or claws, or teeth, or whatever. Because when we come over here, fire types, all of their melee or range attacks deal fire damage. And, oh, actually, Alden, in the comments, Alden says, I get what you mean, kind of like Pokemon. I guess I'm being a little bit too overly verbose here. Alden says, I think you'll need to decide if you allow it on a case-by-case basis. Yes, that is true. That is true, because that's what you're going to be doing in every game. If you've never played it before, and I get the feeling that you haven't, that is essentially how everything is done in Dungeons & Dragons, and that's why the Dungeon Master exists in general. If you wanted to make a comparison, playing Dungeons & Dragons is a little bit like operating in a courtroom. The DM or the GM is the judge, and the rest of you are attorneys. You're there to play the game, and the GM is ostensibly just there to make rulings. The best Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or any tabletop game, the best ones are always going to be hands-off as much as possible. The DM or GM should never tell you what you need to do. They should only tell you what happens when you do it. Which is why I'll use a famous example that I used when I very first started playing, because I was an awful player. Okay, I was a terrible player when I started off because I played Rogue. Now, an unwritten rule when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons is that the DM or GM needs to be the smartest person at the table. And the reason why the DM or GM has to be the smartest person at the table is for two reasons. Number one, because they need to be able to answer all of the questions that the players present. If you're the DM or the GM, to a certain degree, I don't know is not an answer, which is why we're still talking about Parish Song right now. Because I cannot move on from this one until we have an answer. I don't know is not acceptable. I need to have a ruling on it. Because Parish Song is not going to go to everybody. However, every single one of these Pokemon right here is going to get Parish Song by leveling. Gengar, Jynx, Lapras, Politoed, Misdrevious, Smoochum, Celebi. Celebi is legendary, I'm pretty sure. Swablu, Altaria, Absol, Kricketune gets it? I had one of those. I never got that. I guess I didn't stick with it. Mismagius, Arceus. Well, Arceus is God. Come on. Of course it gets it. Melota, Cursola, Screamtail, and Fluttermane. So all of these are going to get Parish Song by the time they level up enough. So we need an answer. I don't know is not acceptable. The other reason is because if you have a player who is smarter than you, they will outsmart you. The example that I like to use is when I was playing a rogue. And this was one of my first times playing, so I didn't know fully what was going on. But we're in a dungeon. I'm following along with everybody else. I'm actually a dual class. I'm a rogue and a mage. I've got a few spells to my name, but I'm mostly relying on my rogue skills. And so we get to a door. And on the door, or when we get to the door, it's like, okay, we find the door, and somebody says, all right, I open the door, and they say the door doesn't move. Okay. I push harder on the door. Is it stuck or is it locked? The door is apparently locked. And they're like, well, great. Now we got to find a way to open the door. So I'm like, oh, wait, hold on a second. Which way does the door open? And they're like, well, what do you mean, which way does the door open? Does it open towards us or does it open away from us? The door opens towards you. Great. The door opens towards us. That means that the hinges should be on our side. What kind of hinges are they? I don't know. They're just normal hinges? Okay, well, normal door hinges, as we understand them today, are called pin barrel hinges. Because you're going to line up the hinges to create what's called the barrel, and then you put a pin down through the top. So if that's the case, we just need something for a pick, and we just need something as a hammer, and we can pop the pins out of these bad boys and just get them out of here. It's like, okay, well, they're not those kind of hinges. Oh, okay. In that case, how are the hinges secured to the door? Because if we can't get the pin out of the hinges, well, the hinge has to be secured to the door somehow, right? I guess. So how is it nailed? With nails? Great. As a rogue, I have a pry bar. Can we just pry the hinges off the doors? You know what? The door opens the other way now. This is why you cannot have a player in the game who is smarter than the DM. Or, alternately, you just had to basically let that player run the game. Because the alternative scenario of that would have been, you just let me open the door because I can find a way through the door. So, that's why you have to have it that way. So, I kind of forgot where I was. I got on a tangent. Anyway, that's kind of why we need to actually finish learning how we're going to do this. That's why the DM has to be the smartest person in the room. That's why they have to be the judge, and they have to be able to say yes or no to everything. And they have to be able to think of this stuff before it happens. So with this Parasong stuff, we have to determine whether or not we're doing lethal damage, because that's going to determine whether or not Parasong is going to just kill everybody. Or the alternative is, I already said that we can have them differentiate between whether they're doing lethal damage or non-lethal damage. I already determined that that we can have it do non-lethal damage always, but that hurts damaging objects. I already determined that if we do lethal damage, it can make this overpowered. The alternative is that I can change Perish Song. We are converting things, and Perish Song is its own move with its own effect. I can change Perish Song to do whatever I want. Now, Perish Song says that it's going to faint every Pokemon that is affected by it. I can change Perish Song individually so that it is not lethal, but leave everything else the way it is. And there is actually one thing that is kind of similar. Now, Alden says that Kricketune gets Perish Song, but it's very high level. And I'm going to look at that because I want to see what level it gets it. Okay. It gets Perish Song at level 50. That's the last thing that it gets, too. So, after level 50, the bug doesn't get anything else. Bugs peak early. Interestingly, though, I want to look at the XP chart. Level 50, where is that? Okay, level 50 is 12,000 XP. Where is, or what would that be for a normal player? Let's see, you're going to start at 0, so that's going to be 2 plus... That's level 3, level 4, level 5. Okay, here's the thing. So, according to the math, 12,000 XP would be between level 5 and 6. Now, why is that important? Because if I scroll all the way down on the magic list, and if I'm scrolling all the way down, you know this is a bad thing. Where is it? Here it is, Wail of the Banshee. Now, Wail of the Banshee actually kinda got nerfed a little bit with Pathfinder. In Dungeons & Dragons, Wail of the Banshee was a straight-up kill spell. And it was a straight-up kill spell for everything that was in range. And since it is a verbal spell, since it is a sonic spell, it really did not care if you were friend or foe. In Pathfinder, however, which is the system that we are basing this on, when you cast a spell, you emit a terrible, soul-chilling scream that possibly kills creatures that hear it except for yourself. It affects up to 1 creature per caster level, inflicting 10 points of damage per caster level. Creatures closest to the point of origin are affected first. Again, it does not differentiate between friend and foe, and 10 points per caster level. Just to give you an idea what that is, since this does not have a maximum, you get your first level 9 spell at level 17, which means that Wail of the Banshee is going to cap out at level 17 at 170 damage. It's going to max out at level 20 at 200 damage, which is just... that's a lot of damage. Okay, you can't put Flex Seal on that. Perish Song is actually stronger than that. This is just doing damage. A lot of damage. Damage that might kill you. Perish Song is not even doing damage. It is just a straight up pass-fail. Now, it is a pass-fail with a time limit because with Perish Song, I believe it's a 3 count? Or is it a 5 count? I think it's a 3 count. Nope, 4. Starting at 4 on the turn Perish Song is used, the Perish count decreases by 1 each turn, including the turn Perish Song was used. When the Pokemon's Perish count reaches 0, it faints. So that is the only thing that makes it a little bit less lethal, is the fact that it is on a time limit. Also, the reason why it's on a time limit is because if you finish the match, then technically Perish Song ceases to matter. And maybe that's our clue, actually, now that I think about it. So, if the Pokemon is switched out, its Perish count is removed. However, if a Pokemon switches out with Baton Pass, its Perish count will be transferred to the new Pokemon. Perish Song becomes an Electric-type move due to Ion Deluge, Plasma Fist, or Galvanic. Pokemon with Volt Absorb, Lightning Rod, or Motor Drive are immune to it. But yeah, it does not actually knock out the Pokemon afterwards. That might be... That's our key, I think. If switching out the Pokemon can end Perish Song, or if ending the battle can end Perish Song, then Perish Song is not permanent. If we take fainting to mean death, then if your Pokemon is reduced to 0 HP, your Pokemon does not suddenly come back to full HP just because the battle ended and now it's back in a Pokeball. Perish Song does not work that way, though. And the same is true for other conditions. A Pokemon that is confused will remain confused. A Pokemon that is asleep will remain asleep. A Pokemon that is poisoned will remain poisoned. A Pokemon under Perish Song will not remain under Perish Song after the battle. So it's not a permanent effect. So the system doesn't need to change. Perish Song needs to. The name and the effect are both a misnomer. It's not actually fainting Pokemon. it's not doing that. We might actually be able... Is faint in here? Flat-footed, fatigued, fascinated. It's not. So... unconscious, I believe it was. Stable, stunned, unconscious. Yeah, an unconscious creature is knocked out and unconscious. Unconscious can result from having negative hit points, but not more than the creature's constitution score from non-lethal damage in excess of the current hit points. Okay. I think what we need to do is we need to use it in this way. And we can allow every single other move to be a lethal damage move. We can stick with that. We can leave our Pokemon being dangerous. We're going to change Perish Song. So here's what Perish Song is going to do. First things first. Perish Song is an auto hit. Okay? There is no resistance and no mischance for this one. Unless, of course, there is something else that is going to do it. It says that Perish Song always hits. It even affects Pokemon if they're behind a substitute or protective, even if it's by a crafty shield. It's even unaffected by Focus Sash, Magic Guard, and Sturdy. So this is going to affect everything. And it's going to affect it regardless of what you do. So, it says that everyone is going to start with a 4 counter, but on your turn it's going to reduce by 1, so we can just skip that and just say, you know, after three turns. So, after 3 turns, the affected target, which I have to say the affected target because this is again going to affect everything. This is going to affect the Pokemon, it's going to affect the trainers, it's going to affect any wildlife, it'll affect NPCs. Here's the really dangerous part about this. Like, imagine, because I was just saying, I want people to be able to imagine what you could possibly do with these moves outside of battle. If we're just going to be rendering people unconscious, could you imagine taking a Pokemon with Perish Song and going to a bank? And maybe you put on some earmuffs or some earplugs, something like that, and then you have your Pokemon use Perish Song. And after 3 turns, which is only, 18 seconds, everybody just falls over unconscious. And then you go and you rob the bank. That's a terrifying thought that you didn't think of now, isn't it? Okay, after 3 turns, the affected target falls unconscious. Now, they fall unconscious, which means that they need to wake up. Alden says, I'd say if it was used out of combat, though, it should instantly aggro everybody who hears it. Not necessarily. Alden also says, since the target probably has to hear it. They do have to hear it, which is important. You have to be able to hear it to be affected by it. It is a song. But would everybody instantly aggro? The answer to that is no. First off, we have to understand that, if you use this in a civilian area, what is most people's reaction to any kind of threat? And I mean, I hate to get real world on this one, but what happens when somebody pulls a gun or a knife, or they start threatening people with a bat or a rod or something like that? People flee. And they flee because most people realize that they are not fighters, and they don't have anything that they can do in the situation to end the threat, and so the next best thing is to avoid the threat. Now, of course, we do have people who end threats. Anybody who is trained in self-defense, anybody who is armed, or anybody who is literally trained for this because they're like an officer. And Pokemon does have officers. In fact, there's like one officer that appears everywhere. Is it Officer Jenny? I don't remember now. It's been a long time since I saw any Pokemon. Anyway, there's one officer who works over the entire world, and she can move faster than Santa Claus. Point is, there are some people who are going to go aggro, and they're going to try and stop the threat. Most people are just going to flee. So, if you were to use it in, say, a bank, most people are not going to aggro and try to stop it. There are a couple that might. If the bank has guards, the guards are going to try. But even the guards will be affected by it, which means those guards will have 3 turns to try and end the threat. At which point, if they don't stop you in 3 turns, they're going to fall unconscious too. Okay, so I was right about Jenny. I'm glad to be right. I love being right. Which is good, because as a GM, you're supposed to be right all the time. Alden says, I will, however, say that the Pokemon world actively encourages vigilantism. You are more right there than I wonder if you realize. Because, and again, I'm going to have to get a little real world here. The argument for arms. Now, when I say arms, most people are going to think guns, but in the US, the Constitution, the Second Amendment, says that you have the right to bear arms. And it does not say firearms, it just says arms. That could be an AR-15. That could be a Glock 17. That could be your grandfather's hunting rifle. That could be an old Pilgrim blunderbuss. It could be a flintlock pistol. It could be a sword, an axe, a machete, a club, a sling. You have the right to bear arms. And the idea is that, number one, in an armed society, everyone is going to be a lot more polite because you don't want to be the one person who draws everybody's ire. I mean, if you're going to draw on them, everybody has the right and the ability to draw on you. Secondly, I mean, obviously it was written post-revolution, the idea that an armed population cannot be tyrannized. Pokemon is going to take this to a new level. Because not only will everybody essentially be armed, everybody will be armed with weapons of mass destruction. I mean, I'm going to go back to the Paris song here for a minute, but this idea that, you know, I'm going to have this Pokemon that can literally sleep an entire building. Because you also have to remember that Paris song, it is a sonic attack. As a sonic attack, it is not horizontal, it's a sphere, it's 3-dimensional, which means anybody who can hear you, even if they're above or below, will also be affected by it. So, I mean, there you go. Now, does this have limits? It actually does, and those limits are built in. Because I want to show you something. I'm going to show you something here real quick. I don't need this page on poisons anymore. I'm going to come here to classes. Classes. So obviously we have our core classes. Barbarian, Bard, Cleric, Druid, Fighter, Monk, Paladin, Ranger, Rogue, Sorcerer, Wizard, okay? These are the classic Dungeons & Dragons classes. Okay, these are the ones that everybody is familiar with. Pathfinder has its own base classes. Alchemist, Cavalier, Gunslinger, Inquisitor, Magus, Omdura, which is kind of like a weird paladin, oracles, shifters, which are kind of like werewolves, summoners, my favorite, witches, vampire hunters, which I think are just overly specific, but then again, they also can hunt more things than vampires, and then vigilantes. Okay. There's also hybrid classes, unchained, or just better versions of the ones that we had before. There's occult classes, which are really cool. Kineticists are basically airbenders, or rather, the avatar, I guess. Mediums, mesmerist, not like the Guild Wars mesmer, though. Occultists, psychic, spiritualists. There's alternate classes. Then we get down to the NPC classes. And Alden says, Pokemon battling is also kind of huge in the culture, so a chance of a 10-year-old kid sending out his Rattata to fight you are high. I'll get to that in a second. The issue is that the first instinct of like 90% of people living in the Pokemon world is fight back. Because even if the trainer is an 80-year-old dude, he can still throw a Machamp. Yes, and let me get to that in just a second. NPC classes. These are the classes for, and as it says right here, almost every other NPC. These characters are designed and controlled by the GM to fill every role from a noble king to a simple baker. While some of these characters use player classes, most rely on the basic NPC classes, allowing them to be easily generated. The following rules govern almost all NPC classes and include information on generating quick NPCs for an evening's game. Now, I actually have my own generators for making NPCs, and mine's better. But, regardless, these are the NPC classes. You have the Commoner. Now, when I say the Commoner, what I mean is everything from the farmer, the day laborer, anybody who does a job that is not skilled in some way. And I realize that saying farmer and not skilled is going to raise the hackles of a lot of people out there. The fact is that while being a farmer does take a lot of experience and know-how, it is still one of those things that so long as you can dig a hole, you have the potential to be a farmer. If you lack the ability to dig a hole, you have bigger problems. Adepts are basically like apprentices. Kinda, sorta. Experts are exactly what the name implies. Aristocrats are exactly what the name implies. They are going to be anything from clergy to nobility. And then warriors are warriors. They are better than commoners at fighting, but they're worse than fighters. Fighters are going to have a lot of specialized skills, whereas warriors are just going to have better stats than the average. Now, I bring this up because most people are going to be commoners. And so let's take a look at a commoner. They can have any alignment, they have a d6 hit die, they have skills. They can climb, craft, they can handle animals, they have perception checks, they have a profession, they have a ride, and they have a swim check. Why? Because these are just basic skills that everybody should have. Everybody should be able to climb. I mean, you should be able to climb a ladder, you should be able to climb a tree, you should be able to climb pretty much anything that is not a brick wall. Everybody should be able to handle domesticated animals. Okay? I'm not telling you that you need to go out and handle a wolf, but everybody should be able to handle domesticated animals. Everybody gets perception because everybody has eyes, ears, hands, a tongue. Everybody has perception. Most people, especially if we're talking about a fantasy situation, most people know how to ride. That doesn't make them good at it, but most people know how to ride. Because you need to. The same thing goes with swimming. Most people would learn, as children, how to swim. And as far as crafting and profession, again, this is one of the things that I emphasize whenever my players make characters. Everybody needs to have a craft and a profession. The way that I describe it, one is your hobby, one is your job. Okay? Crafting is what you do because you want to. Profession is what you do to pay the bills. So, Your craft could be sculpting. Maybe you like to sculpt out of wood, maybe you like to sculpt out of stone, I don't know. But it's what you like to do in your free time. Your profession could be baker. So, during the daytime, you go to the bakery and you bake. You make bread. That's pretty much it back then. I mean, if you're a good baker, you might make some other things, but mostly you're making bread. And then you get to go home, and in the few hours you have before you go to sleep, you decide to carve a log into, I don't know, a Pikachu. Okay? So that's how that works. The thing is, this person, this sculptor, this baker, probably has a Pokemon. Okay? They probably do. That's one of the things that we see in Pokemon is that everybody, or almost everybody, has at least one Pokemon. Now, what that Pokemon is usually reflects who they are and what they do. I mean, I'll take, for example, Mr. Mime. Now, Mr. Mime is not a Pokemon that I'm overly familiar with because I never really liked the Pokemon to begin with. Nothing against the Pokemon, I just like other Pokemon better. I have not, however, seen a Mr. Mime used extensively in combat. That is not to say that it can't be. Mr. Mime, I think, is a psychic type. Maybe it's a normal type. I'm not sure. Either way, though, Mr. Mime is not one that is used extensively in combat as far as I can say. I know some people will have used it. However, Mr. Mime is incredibly common in domestic settings. Why? Because Mr. Mime is humanoid, Mr. Mime has thumbs, and Mr. Mime can do pretty much anything that another person can do. And as such, it's always nice to have an extra pair of hands. So almost everybody has a Pokemon that affects them in some way. When I'm talking about my Baker type, maybe the Baker has a Charmander. Why? Because starting a fire sucks. If you've never had to start a fire without a match or a lighter, fire starting sucks. Which is why, in history, people didn't start fires. Okay? Nobody did that. It's not that nobody could, obviously they could, but in general, you didn't start a fire. You either took a fire from one place to another, so you would get like a bundle of twigs, you would light them on fire here, carry them over here, and then simply set it down and add your wood to it. Or, and here's something for you, believe it or don't, if you were traveling, people would actually bring coals with them. Now, how does that work? What they would do is they would take a piece of thick leather and they would lay out the leather, and when they got done with their fire, they would take some of the hottest coals from the core of the fire and they would put those coals into the leather. And then they would simply wrap those coals up, sometimes several times because they are hot coals, and leather is very insulating. Once they had that done, they could literally stick the bundle with the coals in their pocket or in their shirt, and they would carry the coals with them. That way, once they got to the next place, they could simply get some tinder, put the coals back in, breathe on the coals, and once the coals got to the flash point of the tinder, you have fire again. Starting fire sucks. So if you're a baker, somebody who relies on fire, or if you're a blacksmith who needs a hot fire, having a Pokemon who can breathe fire, now there's something smart. So most people would have a Pokemon that would help them in some way. Now Alden says sometimes the job doesn't even correspond to their type specialty. This is true. I can't argue that because you're right about that. And as he points out, the bug gym leader in Scarlet Violet was a baker as well. Doesn't always work out that way, but a lot of times it does. The reason I bring this up is because, oh, Blizzard says some of the sailors had machops. There's a reason for that. That actually does correspond. Because if you're going to be dealing with rigging and ropes, you want to be strong. I don't know if you've ever realized this, but most people who sail sailboats, they are jacked. Okay? You might see like this sailboat, you know, skipping across the water, and you look on there and it's like, oh, look at that girl on there. She must not be more than 110 pounds soaking wet. I can't believe that she's sailing that boat. And then you get closer and you realize that she's got arms that are like as big around as your leg. Well, maybe not that big, but arms as big around as yours. Why? Because it takes strength to do that. You gotta pull all that stuff down around you. There's a good reason to have machomps on board a sailboat. And, you know, having 4 arms doesn't hurt either. They give the best hugs. Anyway, point being, everybody's going to have a Pokemon of their own. But one of the things that they are not going to have is experience. Again, we have to come back to our XP chart. Now, Pokemon level up a whole lot faster than players do, obviously. That being said, though, as you're leveling up over time, most people are never going to become high level. And what do I mean when I say this? Let's really break down what it means to be high level. Okay? How do I explain this in the best way? I'm gonna duplicate this tab here. Duplicate, here we go. Okay. I'm gonna come over here to equipment, because this is the best way that I can describe this. What does it mean to be a higher level? A higher level means that you are going to be a growing pinnacle of human, or if you're not human, elven, dwarven, whatever. You are going to become a peak specimen of your both race and your class. Now, I say that because hit points. This is a really easy one, because I'm going to come down here and I'm going to pick something that is simple, and I'm going to say a quarterstaff. Okay. A quarterstaff does 1d6 damage. Now, what does that mean? What does 1d6 damage even mean? Let's put this into perspective. I don't know if you've ever seen this done before, but there's been a few people that have gone through and said, you know, what are your personal stats? And they've even gone through to say, all right, if we can look at strength and say that your lift drag is equal to this, what if we go to, say, the gym and we'll get some weights and we'll see how much weight can you lift? Okay? And I'll even pull that up. Like, does anybody here go to the gym? I don't go to the gym, so I honestly do not know what my limits are. But if anybody else goes to the gym and knows what they can lift, put it in the chat. Like, for me, I don't go to the gym, so I don't know what my max is, but I do know that I can haul a 60-pound bag of dog food, no problem. I mean, I can lift up a 60-pound bag of dog food and throw it over my shoulder and carry that pretty much all day. So, a 60-pound bag of dog food, for me, is pretty much a light load. Now, that's not much, especially as we're going to find out. Strength, here we go. And strength is going to have our carrying capacity with it. So if I was looking at mine, A medium to light load for me is probably going to cap out at around 60, maybe a little bit more pounds, which means that my cap for a light load is probably going to put me in the area of about 14. All right? Just judging on what I have already done. So, yeah, my strength is about a 14, which puts me right there with a gnoll, a dire badger, a baboon, etc. Alden says I can bench a total of 40 kilograms in the gem at most. Alright, that at most is important, except that's in kilograms. What the hell's a kilogram? I use God-fearing American pounds. Hold on, I gotta convert this. Let's see, kg to pound. 40 kilograma is about 88 pounds. Okay. So if you're benching 40 kilograms, it's about 88 pounds. Max lift is different than carrying. So let's see. Here we go. Carrying capacity. For lifting and dragging. Lifting and dragging. A character can lift as much as your maximum load over your head. So there we go. If that's the case, then we have to assume that 40 kilograms, 88 pounds, if that conversion was correct. Was that correct? That seems a little bit low. No, that's what it says. 1 kilogram equals roughly 2.205 pounds. So 40 kilograms, 88 pounds. Yeah. So that means that your heavy load has to be about 88 pounds. I'm going to go ahead and round it up because there is no 88, which means that your strength score should be about 9. So maybe you need to hit the gym a little bit more. Either way, we can establish a strength score based on what you can already do. PC Unicorn's in the chat. I did not miss you. Okay, I didn't miss you. PC Unicorn says, why brain? Definition high level when you do drugs and try to keep the bubble in the middle when you try to balance it on your head. But if the bubble is on top of your head, how can you see it? Alright, anyway, moving on to this. We can also do the same thing with, like, intelligence, okay? Where's intelligence? Here we go. So, when we're looking at intelligence, 10. We're going to start with 10 because I'm not going to go below 10. 10 is average. You know what you need to know to get by. This goes back to what I was saying about farmers. Why is being a farmer an unskilled thing? Because as long as you can dig a hole, plant something, water it, and tend to it, you can be a farmer and you can survive. Now, to be a good farmer, you need to know a lot more. But to be your average field hand, you don't need that much knowledge. At the next level, you pick up new ideas quickly and learn easily. You know a bit more than necessary and you're fairly logical. Okay, this describes most people, I would think. At least most people in the modern era. Level 14 to 15, you can solve most problems without even trying very hard, and you're able to do math or solve logic puzzles mentally with reasonable accuracy. So basically, if you like Sudoku, you're probably a level 14, or you're probably a 14 to 15 intelligence. Same thing goes with most, like, crosswords and stuff like that. If you're a puzzle person, you're probably a 14 to 15. 16 to 17, noticeably above the norm, fairly intelligent, you're able to understand new tasks quickly. Now, me personally, I think this is where I fit in. I've always been able to pick up on new things relatively quickly. I can learn new jobs and become independent within a day. I can hold intelligent conversations with just about anybody. I think this is kind of where I fit in. And then 18 and 19 is genius level intelligence, may invent new processes or uses for knowledge. I mean, if you're involved in any kind of research and development, this is pretty much where you are. If you are a designer, an architect, an engineer, basically if you went to school for a job, that might be where you fit in. And then anything higher than that is just above genius level, and that's not going to be most people. But again, this is where we can, that's where we can sit in. So where does this get back to, like, commoners? Constitution. Now, the average constitution is occasionally contracts some mild sickness, average human healthiness. Okay? Fair enough. 12 to 13 can take a few hits before being knocked unconscious. That's an important one. 14 to 15, able to labor for 12 hours on most days. That's also an important one. I mean, if you're able to put in long days of work, at least 5 days a week, maybe up to 7 days a week, you have a high constitution. 16 to 17 easily shrugs off most illnesses. Okay? I mean, if you almost never get sick, you might have a high constitution. I also think that I might fall into one of these categories because I've worked 12-hour shifts before. I didn't like it, but I was able to do it no problem, and I also almost never get sick, which is nice, because getting sick sucks. And level 18 to 9, ability to score 18 to 19, able to stay awake for days on end. Maybe when I was younger. Sure as hell don't want to do that now. So there we go. Now I bring this up because when we're talking about weapon damages, a quarterstaff does 1d6 damage. When we look at the commoner, they get 1d6 hit die. Now, let's just max out all of our numbers here. Alright? So every commoner is going to get a full 6 hit dice, and every time they get hit with a quarterstaff, they're going to take 6 points of damage. Before strength bonuses. Of course, it's also before constitution bonuses too. They neutralize. The fact is that a level 1 commoner can be knocked unconscious or even potentially killed if you were to, with malice, hit them in the head with a quarterstaff. Now I want you to really think about that one. Okay? A quarterstaff is usually about an inch or so thick, I believe. Yeah, a quarterstaff is a simple piece of wood. It's about an inch thick, so that's like 2.5 centimeters, because I know some of you are metric. About 5 feet in length. So imagine if somebody came up to you with that quarterstaff and just wham! Right upside the head. What do you think would happen? Okay? If you think that you would stand there and be able to just take it, you might be a higher level. If you think that it would knock you unconscious, or even just disable you, it would... You might be a low level. For most people, most NPCs, if you were to go through and just start wailing on people with a quarterstaff, you are going to disable, render unconscious, or maybe even kill many of them. The reason being that most people just never go through the training it takes to take a hit like that. Some people will have a higher tolerance for it, and that's where Constitution comes in. But the fact of the matter is that most people, if you were to just run around and start attacking them, are not going to last long. And I'm not even going to pull up news stories on this one. I'm sure you know them on your own. That is quite representative of the average population. I bring that up because now we can get back into Pokemon. Most people are going to be relatively low level. They are going to be levels 1, 2, maybe 3, some of them are going to be 4. Most people are going to accrue a lot of knowledge over a lifetime, but they're not going to accrue a ton of experience or physical training. I mean, I think for a moment, I'm actually going to get all Naruto on ya. I'm going to get all Naruto on you for a minute, okay? In Naruto, one of the things that every ninja has to master is something called chakra. Chakra is the energy that gives them all their supernatural abilities. But chakra, in order for you to use it and mold it, you have to first mix it. What are you mixing? You're mixing 2 types of chakra, actually. There is physical chakra and spiritual chakra. Okay? Spiritual chakra is trained by training your mind. It's done through meditation, through focus, through learning. Anything that is mental raises your spiritual chakra. And then obviously the opposite to that is going to be anything physical. Training your body, training your stamina, training your strength is going to increase your physical chakra. Somehow you mix your spiritual chakra and your physical chakra and you get fireballs. Don't ask me, I don't know how it works. But the point is that you mix both of them and you get that. If you only have one or the other, though, well, then things are different. There is a bit of a caveat in Naruto in that they have 3 types of jutsu. Taijutsu, which is actual physical combat. Ninjutsu, which is fireballs and lightning strikes and just basically magic. And then Genjutsu, which is completely mental. If you are high in spiritual chakra, you're better at Genjutsu. If you're high in physical chakra, you're better at Taijutsu. If you're strong in both, you have great Ninjutsu. And then obviously the opposites are true. If you have poor one or the other, you're going to be bad at those things. It is possible for an expert in Pathfinder to have a lifetime of experience, but to have never trained their bodies. And as such, you could run around and just keep wailing on them, and because they've never trained anything and they don't have that kind of experience, they're just not going to be able to take a hit. And the reason I say that is because if the trainer doesn't have a lot of XP, then very likely neither will their Pokemon. So we mentioned how the Baker in Violet has a whole bunch of bug Pokemon. Blizz mentioned that sailors would often have Machops to help out on the ship. I mentioned having a Mr. Mime in the house, because having a Mr. Mime in the house is just useful. But if the trainer, let's just say that the experience of both the trainer and the Pokemon was equal. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to roll a die. It takes 1,000 experience points to get from level 1 to level 2. Okay? And that is 1,000 experience points of active training. Okay? This is why you actually get skills when you level up. This is why you get new class features, new spells, new whatever. I've even proposed systems that would allow you to actually use the skills that you're training. I'm not going to get into that right now. It's not important. The point is, though, that unless you're actively training, you're not accruing experience points. And so if I just roll 1d 1,000 to see where our level 1 person is, I roll 164. So let's say that I have a commoner with 164 XP. Well, 164 XP means that their Pokemon is going to be a whole level 6. Okay, well, a level 6 Pokemon isn't that great. It's really not. Don't get me wrong, a level 6 Pokemon is still going to have things like Scratch or Bite or whatever, and they can really mess somebody up, but a level 6 Pokemon is still kind of nothing. So I'm going to go way back now. We're circling way back here to the Parish Song thing. Let's say that we have a bank robber who wants to go in and rob the bank. And they have a level 50 Cricketune, because that's the only one I've looked up so far, who has Parasong. And so they're going to go in and they're going to walk in the bank, they're going to pop their Cricketune. Maybe the bank has a policy that already says like no Pokemon inside the bank because they know better. So you toss out your Pokeball and Cricketune comes out. Cricketune, I'm not even sure. Anyway, you throw it out, and obviously as soon as the Pokemon comes out, the security guards are just like, nope, we're not doing this. And so they grab their billy clubs or whatever it is, and they come running after you. And you just say, all right, use Parasong. And so you do. They use Parasong, everybody hears it. And so maybe there's some people that are there, they're just like, well, I've got a Pokemon, I'll toss my Pokemon out too. All right. The bank robber has a minimum level 50 Cricketune, and everybody else has somewhere between a level 1 and a level 10 Pokemon. How do you think this goes? I leave that one there because it's not impossible. I mean, if you want to just gang up on the person who decided to toss a Pokemon out in the middle of the bank, yeah, we got something going there. Maybe they dogpile on them. Maybe they go or they target the trainer instead and take out the trainer. And without the trainer, what's Cricketune going to do? I think Alden said that. Let me read up. Hold on. Yeah, here we go. Alden says, and killing the trainer doesn't take down the Pokemon. In most cases, it makes the Pokemon go berserk instead. So, yeah, even if you were to go ahead and target the trainer, you've only solved half of the equation. The trainer's not actually dangerous, and by going after the trainer, it might even make the Pokemon more dangerous. And it was already dangerous to begin with. So everybody in town having their own Pokemon is going to be a deterrent, but it's also not going to be the deterrent that you think it is. Because it's a bit like having everybody armed with a gun, okay? Everybody has a gun, all right? But if I had to give, like, guns levels, it's a bit like having everybody be armed with a BB gun. Or maybe a pellet gun. Now, is that to say that BB guns and pellet guns are harmless? They are absolutely not harmless. They are certainly less lethal. However, I will point out that pellet guns are used for pest control. A pellet gun will kill small animals. Pellet guns are used for hunting chipmunks and squirrels and snakes and rabbits and rats and anything that is a small animal like that. The only reason that a pellet gun is not considered a lethal weapon to humans is because we are so big that a pellet gun usually does not do enough damage to kill us. A pellet gun will still generally wound us, though, and a pellet that can actually penetrate your body, well, pellets are small enough to get between your lungs, or between your ribs. A pellet gun can puncture a lung. If a pellet gun can puncture a lung, it can puncture your heart. And of course, if we're going to keep the comparison going, the next step up from a pellet gun would be something like a 10 caliber or maybe a 22 caliber. 10 caliber guns are pretty uncommon. They exist. There's more of them than others. But 22 caliber is super common. And 22 caliber is absolutely a small game gun. 22 calibers can be used to hunt everything up to, I think, a fox size. I think you need to be a good shot to kill a fox with a 22, but it's definitely possible. And so, yeah, I mean, we're talking about everyone pulling out 22 guns, or 22 caliber guns. it's not going to end well. Okay? They don't have to be necessarily the biggest guns to make a difference. At the same time, though, 22s lack what's called stopping power. They don't have knockdown power. You're going to put holes in things, but you're not stopping the threat. And so when people talk about self-defense, they talk about things like knockdown power, and that's why people carry something like a 38 special or something like a 357, because if you get shot by one of those, it is going to knock you off your feet usually. If it doesn't actually knock you over, usually you'll feel it enough that it will render you unable to act. And that's kind of what we're looking at when it comes to, say, Pokemon, is maybe they're not going to be that big, but will they have the ability to stop the threat? And they should. They can stop a human threat at least. A Pokemon threat, it'll depend entirely on how high level it is. So, okay, getting back to the whole Parasong thing, we've established that if they use it, people can still do something. People will be armed. Whether they can stop it or not is debatable. Getting back to what it does, though, it says after 3 turns, we're going to render our targets unconscious. But then, for how long? And for that, normally it would be a will save to resist it. But as we've already established, there is no save versus this. There is no mischance, there is no save, there's nothing. So instead, we need to wake people up. So here's what I think we're going to do. We're going to make this a wisdom check. Now, why am I making this a wisdom check? Normally, anything that has a mental, intellectual, or psychic component is going to be resisted by a will save. And a will save is directly boosted by your wisdom score. The higher your wisdom, the better your will save. So what we're going to do is this. What we're going to do is we're going to make this a wisdom check. It's going to be a wisdom. It's going to be a DC. And this one's going to be tough. If I make it super low, then there is a good chance that everyone simply snaps out of it. And so, what good is the move? If I make it super high, then nobody ever breaks out of it. I need to find that middle ground. When looking at Parasong, we already looked at Kricketune, and Kricketune gets it at level 50. What about some others? Let's look at Gengar, okay? At what level does Gengar get it? Where is it? Here we go. Shadow Punch, Parasong. Gengar gets Parasong at level 1. Okay. Wait a minute, but Gengar's a level or a stage 3 Pokemon, isn't it? Okay. It evolves from Haunter when traded or when exposed to a linking cord. Oh god, I gotta do things like that. Yeah, that's a problem not for today. Anyway, it evolves from Haunter. It is the final form of Ghastly. So Ghastly, right here it says that Ghastly evolves into Haunter at level 25 and then evolves into Gengar whenever exposed to a linking cord. Okay, so we're gonna have to deal with that later. The point is, though, that technically speaking, Gengar could get it at level 25. Assuming, of course, that my logic here is correct. So, if Ghastly becomes Haunter at level 25 and then you immediately traded it, that would be a level 25 Gengar. Am I right? That seems right. I think I'm right about that one. So, if we think about that one, and we use our typical formula of their level divided by 5, that means that if I took it at just the level divided by 5, that Gengar's Perish Song would last until you made a Wisdom save that was a DC 5 or higher. Now, what does that mean for a level 20 or a level 100 Gengar? That would then be a DC 20 or higher. So let's start thinking about probabilities here. Now, obviously, if we're using just a straight D20 at level 5, or at a DC 5, excuse me, that is a 75% chance that they wake up. Okay? And this is why we have to do these numbers, because we have to look at the actual, we have to look at the percentages, because the percentages are kind of what matters. If we were to sleep 100 people, 75% of them would wake up on the first turn. And then 75% of the 25 that are left would wake up, and then 75% of them, and so on and so forth. Now, at level 100, Gengar uses Perish Song. And so everybody is put to sleep. Because it's level 100, now the Wisdom DC for that is a DC 20. What does that mean? That means that only 5% of the 100 people slept are going to wake up, because it's a natural 20. And then 5% of them, and then 5% of them, and so on and so forth. However, what happens if I increase this? Because that means that it's capping out at a DC 20. And this is only being affected by your Wisdom score. This is not something that you can train up. Like, if we look at our Wizard over here, every class gets a bonus to their saves, to the point where at level 20, a Wizard gets a plus 12 bonus to their Wisdom saves. That's a DC 20 plus 12 before they even get to add in their Wisdom, which can be anywhere from nothing to 5. But we're not adding this one for for Perish Song. So we can't overblow this. If we went ahead and we added in their Wisdom save, which could be anywhere up to 4. If it was up to 4, you know, you have an 18 in your Wisdom at level 1. That would mean that the chance of waking up from a level 100 Gengar would be a 16 up roll. Because 16 plus 4 is going to equal 20. 16 is 80%, so there would be a 20% chance of waking up if you had an 18 in Wisdom. Now, a level 100 Gengar is going to be pretty rare. You're not going to see one of those very often. But we still have to keep it in consideration. I think that works, actually. I think that those numbers scale well. I think that if I were to give it a base save on the DC, either it was just a 5, which would scale then from a DC 5 to a DC 25, I think that it would be too much. Because a DC 25 would basically mean that any normal person that got caught in it would never wake up again. because the normal, everyday, average citizen would just sleep forever. Whereas if we keep that at a 20, that person is going to wake up eventually. They might be out all day, but eventually they're going to roll a 20. It might take them a long time, but it will happen. It's a guarantee. It's why taking 20 is an option. When it comes to rolls, there is a take 10, there's a take 20 option. Taking 10 means that you're unpressured and that you have the ability to succeed guaranteed anyway. Taking 20 assumes that you are not being pressured. It also assumes that you're going to fail and that there is not a destructive or harmful effect to failure. Because it always assumes the failure happens first. Since there is no harmful effect to remaining asleep, we can take 20 on the waking up once the danger has passed for all of our NPCs, and they will simply wake up over time. I think that this is the way to go. So it's going to be a Wisdom DC equal to their level divided by 5. And that should be everything that we need for Pair Song. Now, we have spent an hour and 40 minutes working on this. Why? As I stated before, when you're running the game as the DM or the GM, I don't know is not an acceptable answer. There needs to be a solution for everything. There needs to be an answer for everything. And the biggest problem that we had here was, do the Pokemon do lethal damage, non-lethal damage, and how does this affect the permanence of the world? Because if we do not have, or if we cannot answer the permanence of the world, we can't really continue. Because there's a logical inconsistency, and it's a big logical inconsistency. Now that we have answered this, we can establish all of those things. Number 1, Pokemon do lethal damage. That question is answered. Because they do lethal damage, that means that all actions of Pokemon have permanence. A Pokemon can kill, a Pokemon can destroy, and those effects will remain in the world forever. Because of that, the relationship between human and Pokemon is also very significant. As pointed out, every person is essentially going to be a vigilante because every person is armed. Every person is carrying in their pocket a weapon of mass destruction. Potentially. Maybe not at level 6. But hey, even at level 6, a Pokemon that can do 1d40 damage to the average person who only has 6 hit points, it's going to be very, very important that you be on your guard. Stay out of the tall grass. We have also established that Perish Song, while being an incredibly powerful move, is not going to be the permanent kill move that its name implies it is. It is simply going to render everybody unconscious, at which point they will wake up on their own over time. Everything in the world now has logical consistency. Everything in the world fits. So, that was a long one to go through and do, but well worth the time and effort to do it. That is why we are here doing this in this way. These are the kinds of questions that the people who actually make the games too often overlook because the answers are too hard and they don't want to do the work. But we, here, we're better than that. Alright, so let's at least knock out a couple more of these before we get out of here today. What do you say? Alright, seeding. A Pokemon is affected by Leech Seed or Sappy Seed loses HP every turn, and the Pokemon in the position of the user the move has their HP healed. In battles involving multiple Pokemon, if no Pokemon is in that position, for example, if it's fainted and could not be replaced, no HP will be deducted from the seeded the seeded Pokemon. However, if the Pokemon is later able to occupy that position, it will be sapped again. Okay, sure. I know this one. I'm very familiar with Leech Seed. It's one of the reasons that I fell in love with Bulbasaur. I mean, Bulbasaur is kind of cute, I guess, sure. I really fell in love with what Bulbasaur could do. Because I discovered that Poison Powder plus Leech Seed plus Sleep Powder is one of the most devastating combinations in Gen 1. It's a bit like playing Dead Space, when you realize that, you know, the gun that they gave you in the very beginning of the game is the best gun in the game. That little pistol that fires 3 rounds and you can turn it vertical or horizontal, it's the best gun in the game. If you go with that thing, you're fine. You can carry that thing from beginning to end. Everything else you pick up is just extra. With Bulbasaur, and then later on Ivysaur and Venusaur, Poison Powder, Sleep Powder, Leech Seed, and Solar Beam if they decide to get uppity. That's all you need. And then, you know, something else for whatever happens to be strong against grass, which is admittedly half of everything. So, seeded, I do not believe we need to do anything. Her rules. The fact of the matter is that every turn it's going to be 1/8 or 1/16 in Generation 1 of their maximum HP. We can do that. I mean, we're doing it with so many of the other ones. I mean, like Burn is 1d 10% of the move's power. In fact, I can even go ahead and copy this and just add it. There we go. So if you seed the Pokemon, whatever the power of the move happens to be. Except I don't know if Leech Seed... I don't think Leech Seed actually has a power. It's just a seed. No, I'll just leave it as per rules. We'll figure it out. Okay. So we're moving on from that. Salt Cure. This is one that I don't know. Salt Cure inflicts 1/8 of the target's maximum HP as damage per turn in addition to the damage dealt when it is used. If steel and or water types are affected by Salt Cure, the amount of damage is 1/4 of its max HP. Okay, this is not a move that I'm familiar with. Oh, because it is the signature move of Knucklestack and Garganicle. Those are weird names. I get it. NaCl, sodium chloride. It's table salt. It's the salt Pokemon. Either way, though. Yeah, Alden just said the same thing. Salt Cure is from the move Salt Cure. Only one Pokemon is going to get it. I mean, again, I don't like the 1/16 and 1/8 rule for the HP, but again, I have to trust my players on this one. 1/8 or 1/16 or 1/4 of HP rounded down. Everyone's got a phone, everyone's got a calculator. We can work with this. All right. Splinters. Now, as I recall, even Alden was questioning this one, and Alden's like the uber expert when it comes to Pokemon. It's just like, I haven't even seen that one. And I think I know why. It says Splinters is a status condition exclusive to Pokemon Legends Arceus. A Pokemon afflicted with Splinters will take damage equivalent to 25 or a 25 power move from the user, factoring in type effectiveness, but not the random damage factor. Splinters damage the target at the end of the turn, and they last 3 turns for a regular move, 2 turns for an agile style move, 4 turns for strong. The moves are Ceaseless Edge, Pin Missile, Spike, Stealth Rock, and Stone Axe. Okay, well, again, I'm not taking things from Pokemon Arceus. Like, Stealth Rock is already in the game. Stealth Rock already has a move, or already has rules to it. I do not need whatever these extra rules are from Pokemon Arceus because they want it to be avant-garde. So, we don't need Splinters. Alden says, so was their answer for hazard moves? I think it's a bit more than that. Stealth Rock is a hazard move, yes. I think Spikes is too. Stone Axe, though, I don't recall. But maybe that's because it was never in the other games. I'm not sure. I don't know. So either way, though, the same thing applies. We're not dealing with it. We're not dealing with it. Alright, so moving down. Automatize. A Pokemon that uses Automatize will have its speed stat increased by 2 stages. I think that's pretty obvious. It's pretty simply stated. And if the user successfully changes its speed, its weight decreases by 220 pounds. If the user successfully changes its weight, the message is the Pokemon became nimble. And Alden says that Stone Axe sets up Stealth Rocks. Ceaseless Edge sets up Spikes. They both also do damage. Does it really? Well, now I'm curious. Stone Axe. Damage-dealing Rock-type move introduced during Generation 8. In Pokemon Legends Arceus, it's a signature move of Cleavor. And is it only in that? Oh, no, Generation 9. So that's Scarlet Violet. Stone Axe inflicts damage and sets up Stealth Rock on one of the opposing sides of the field. Okay, so you basically use Stone Axe and get free Stealth Rocks then? Oh, but it's a signature move, so only one person's going to get it anyway. Yeah, alright, so, like, the odds of you getting that one are pretty slim. It'll be fine. We can just follow the rules as they're written. We don't need to do anything more for that. Anyway, back to autotomize. Autotomize. I don't like that word. Anyway, so a Pokemon that uses the move Autotomize will have a speed stat increase by 2 stages and decrease its weight by 100 kilograms. If the user successfully changes, it says they became nimble. Weight loss from Autotomize stacks, so multiple times will continue to decrease its weight until it reaches the minimum weight. The weight reduction cannot be transferred by Baton Pass or removed by Haze. And the weight will reset if it changes form. Or if the battle ends, I guess. Now, here's a bit of a problem for us, but I don't think it's really a problem. I think it's something we can overlook. So when we were picking the sizes for our Pokemon, the size for Pokemon is going to be their height or their weight, whichever is greater. Technically speaking, if their weight is greater, by reducing the weight, then it would technically reduce their size, but I don't think that we're actually reducing weight. Technically speaking, what I believe we're doing here is reducing density. Because I don't think the size of the Pokemon is actually changing, it's just becoming lighter. If you were to use this on, say, a Charizard, or whoever gets it, I have no idea. Who even gets this move? Pineco Fortress. Wait, I know this guy. Steelix. Oh, hey, this guy goes all the way back to Gen 1, I think. Right? Maybe? Level. Oh, that's the level they get it at. Regardless, yeah. It's not actually going to change their size. It's just changing their density to let them move faster. They get lighter, they move faster. They're still just as strong. I mean, it's basic physics. So we're not going to change their sizes at all. We're just going to go ahead and let them become lighter. And in doing so, quite frankly, I mean, nothing really needs to change. Now, it says if it hits. It's a self-targeting status move. Why wouldn't it hit? I'm not sure. I'm sure there's some status effects out there that might cause it to not hit, but I don't know what they are off the top of my head. Point is, though, that I think we can just take it rules as written. So, per rules. We'll keep it that way. Alright, we'll get one more done. One more and then we're out of here. Identified. When a Pokemon is affected by Foresight, Odor Sleuth, or Miracle Eye, its evasion stat increases, will be ignored when it is targeted by any move. In addition, a Ghost-type target will lose its immunity to normal or fighting-type moves when affected by Foresight or Odor Sleuth. And a Dark-type target will lose its immunity to Psychic-type moves. Interesting. There is nothing about this that I feel like I need to change. This is a very simple status effect. And there's no numbers or definitions here that I think that I need to worry about. I mean, if we're talking about a fight in Pathfinder, if you've got a ghost type and I've got a fighting type, and my fighting type identifies you somehow, then there you go. It says Foresight, Odor Sleuth, or Miracle Eye. If I just look at Foresight, well, there you go. Machop, Machoke, and Machamp. All fighting types, and they all get Foresight. So if we're fighting, say, that Haunter that we mentioned earlier, Machamp uses Foresight, and after that, just lay into him. There's nothing I need to do here. This is super easy. And that's what I'm saying. It's like most of these are going to be super simple. There's nothing we need to do. There's a few that we need to really spend the time to work on because they're just different. Poison was one of them. We had to spend some time on Poison because Poison was weird. The same thing with Substitute, and then obviously Perish Song, because the effects are weird. But that's all we got time for today. That's all I can do. Minimize should be pretty easy too. Minimize is just gonna literally minimize their ability. Minimize, though, might actually change their size. So we'll have to look at that, because Minimize increases their evasion significantly. But at the same time, a Minimized Pokemon, literally here in the picture, is actually tiny. So we'll have to spend some time looking at that one, because that one's going to have a lot of effects. And like, it was mentioned when we were discussing, how to get through a door. Alden had mentioned, and I'm sorry I didn't bring this up earlier, but Alden had mentioned the idea that you could just have your ghost type phase through the door. The thing is, you're not wrong about that. Technically speaking, if you can have an attack potentially phase through your ghost type Pokemon because it is a ghost type, then technically speaking, if your ghost type wanted to pass through a solid object, then you would have to roll a D100, and if you manage to roll in the incorporeal section, your Pokemon would be able to pass through a solid object. Then the question simply becomes, can it get through that solid object within 6 seconds? Technically speaking, if your Pokemon can move 30 feet per round, which is standard, for medium size anyway, if you have to be in an open square on one side and you have to end on an open square on the other side, technically speaking, your Haunter, or whatever ghost Pokemon that you have, could pass through 20 feet of a solid object. And I can't help but grin at that because, oh my god, the possibilities. Can you imagine the possibilities if you have a ghost Pokemon that can pass through 20 feet of solid object? That's got potential. Anyway, though, we can get into more of that stuff next time. So, for now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave it off here. I'm going to thank everybody for coming out. Your help in the chat has been absolutely invaluable doing all of this. Okay? I need you guys. I need you guys more than I can say. Because but when this is done, oh, this is going to be so amazing. I'm so in love with this module already. Every single one of these Pokemon are going to be absolutely amazing. Especially, like we just said, ghost types can go through walls. It's so cool. I love it. It's going to be great. Anyway, if you're here, and I just realized I forgot to do the plugs at the beginning of the stream. Oh well, we're doing it now. If you're here and you're not subscribed already, do subscribe to the channel. We're going to be doing more of these. We do these every week. We do them every Sunday. Even if you're catching up on them later, I mean, there's a new one every week. So, subscribe if you're not subscribed already. Hit the bell icon. That way you get notified when they come out. I send out my own alerts too, but there we go. If you know somebody else who's into Pokemon or tabletop gaming, you can go ahead and share this with them. Otherwise, though, if you just like me, you like what I'm doing here, leave a like on the video. You can leave comments down below. More so, though, if you're going to leave a comment, would you join the Discord? We have a Discord. Go ahead, join the Discord. And once you do that, if you want to play with us, I mean, you can come and hang out with us whenever you want. I mean, we can do memes and stuff like that. Everyone loves memes. We have fun. But you can go to the Behind the Screen channel. Once you're there, let me know what games that you would like to play and what your availability is. As soon as I have enough people, then I will go ahead and get a game started. But I need the players first. So come join us, come play with us, and short of that, at least come play with us next week when we do more stuff for Pokemon. So I hope to see you there. I hope to see you next week. And until then, take care.